Welcome to the Hennepin-University Partnership webinar series. Today's webinar is titled Partnering for Impact, the Hennepin University's Partnership Collaboration in Action, and is presented by HUP Director Amy Delahanty and HUP Senior Project Manager Margaret Turvey and Hennepin County Land and Water Unit Manager Karen Gaius. My name is Sophia Latkins, and I'm a graduate assistant with the Hennepin University Partnership. HUP is a strategic partnership between the University of Minnesota and Hennepin County that aims to connect these organizations at points of mutual benefit. In this session, you'll learn how HUP projects have helped Hennepin County departments address critical issues through faculty research, student programming, and other innovative solutions. Before we get started, just a few Zoom reminders for our audience. Your video, audio, and chat are not enabled. If you need any support from the HUP team, please use the Q&A function. If you'd like to ask a question, you can submit that through the Q&A function. We will monitor questions throughout and save time to address them at the end. This webinar will be recorded. Thank you to all of you for joining us today. Please look for an email from hup@umn.edu with a survey and a link to the recorded webinar video tomorrow. And finally, I'm excited to introduce the presenters for today's webinar. As director of the Hennepin University Partnership, Amy Delahanty oversees the strategic connection between the U of M and Hennepin County. She helps to connect these two institutions at mutual points of benefit, guide strategy, and foster relationships. And she's joined by Margaret Stumbo-Turvey as a senior project manager of HUP. Margaret advances HUP's strategy by managing key programs and events and ensuring seamless operations. We will also be joined by guest speaker Karen Gaius from Hennepin County. Karen is the manager of Land and Water Unit in the Environment and Energy Department. Her team operates programming related to habitat conservation, water resource protection and improvement, and urban and community forestry. Karen was instrumental in drafting the county's climate action plan and is leading work related to several key climate goals, including an effort to plant 1 million trees by 2030, acquiring 6,000 acres of conservation easements by 2040, and optimizing the use of nature-based climate solutions to help achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Her current role is focused on making connections across disciplines and partners to create a more integrated approach to building resilient natural systems that improve people's lives. She'll speak about her experience working with HUP. And with that, I'll pass it over to Amy to get us started.
Great. Thanks so much, Sophie. Welcome, everyone. And thanks so much for being here. I've got a split screen going on, so you might see me kind of direct my head the other side, but just know I am looking and talking at you all. So thank you again for taking the time to carve out to learn a little bit more about HUP. Sophie did a great sort of round of introductions about Margaret and I, so I won't go too much into our roles, but just to kind of just reground, both Margaret and I help steward this work, helping to support the partnership between the county and the University of Minnesota. And we're joined by some awesome graduate research assistants like Sophie that help to kind of bolster the work. So we're really excited to talk about the partnership today. We're hoping to kind of demystify like what it exactly is the partnership between the county and the U. What have we been up to for the last 20 years? What might you get out of collaborating with the University of Minnesota? And how can we, Margaret and I, help support you in your work? So this presentation is geared towards a county audience. So if you happen to be from the U and you found your way to this webinar, welcome as well. We're glad you're here, but just know that a lot of the content is geared towards our county partners. So the agenda we have for today, we're going to kind of start off with a little bit of context setting. If you're anything like me, I like to kind of know what's the broader landscape in which my work fits under. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll then get into some more specifics about the partnership between the county and the university. We'll jump into a little bit more about the HUP office and what exactly we do to help support this vibrant ecosystem. And then we'll hear from Karen about her project spotlight and her work and trajectory of working with the University of Minnesota. And then we'll end with an opportunity to answer any questions you all might have for us. So as we are kind of clipping along the presentation, feel free to drop your question At the end, there'll be space for us to answer those, and we might have a couple questions for you all. So just kind of broadly at the 30,000 foot level, setting the context of the partnership's work, we are nested within a broader conversation that's happened over the last 20 plus years around cross-sector collaboration. Nationally, thousands of collaborative efforts and cross-sector partnerships have been launched over the last 2 decades as people and communities have been working hard together to address the most pressing, complex issues facing their communities today in mutual stewardship with one another. None of you all would be surprised at these topic areas, but these challenges can be found in that are working across silos and institutions in partnership with community and kind of a collective impact frame, because there's just a general and growing recognition that no one entity should or could do this complex work alone. So about 2 decades ago, leaders from Hennepin County and the University of Minnesota, I mean, there's been a partnership between these two institutions for a long time, and it predates our work here at the partnership, but it had been in sort of fits and spurts and ad hoc ways. And the leaders from these two institutions wondered, is there a way to more formalize this partnership? Is there a way to kind of help establish an agreement between these two institutions and then have a sort of backbone organization or an office help keep the momentum going, help knit conversations, find places to connect these two institutions where it counts. So it was a bit of a grand experiment when 20 years ago they decided they wanted to, fund a HUP office. And, it's worked. We've been a nationally recognized model of collaboration, and we hope to sort of continue the for many years to come. So now kind of dropping into the 10,000 foot level talking about the partnership between the county and the university. These are just some of the hard numbers behind the health and the vibrancy of this partnership, but we know there's a deeper story to be told here, which is about the people, it's about the communities, it's about the relationship and the impact. And that's something we as the HUP office hope to lean into the future, but for now, we've got some hard numbers that tell part of the story. So as I've just mentioned, we hit our 20-year mark, and through that time, about $22.2 million has flowed between the county and the university. Just over the last 10 years, since we've kind of been systematically counting these collaborations, there's been about 300 projects that have occurred. We know there's a lot of work that's also happened outside of this number, but through our master cooperative agreement, which I'll talk about in a little bit, that's the number of projects that have been sort of actively tracked. And behind all of this, right? Like it's the why. Why are we collaborating? Why are we doing this work? Why at the HUP office are we doing connecting these two institutions? It's really to support mutually beneficial collaborations that help reduce disparities and enrich the lives of Hennepin County residents. So why is Hennepin County collaborating with the University of Minnesota? These are just a few of the reasons why we have heard why folks collaborate with the U. But here at HUP, policymakers, students, faculty, practitioners have been working hard together to leverage their collective strengths to create a more equitable and just future for Hennepin County residents. The partnership really tries to help ground policies and practices and behaviors in both lived experience as well as evidence-based data to push each other to think differently about issue areas or policy solutions. Working with the University of Minnesota allows you to spark innovative and creative thinking on policy and practice, to facilitate meaningful evidence-based solutions that may provide additional credibility to your work or to help influence decision makers. It's the ability to leverage outside perspectives and to add capacity to your team. So that's just a few of the reasons. We know there's many, many more. In what areas are the county and the university collaborating? So these are just a few of the areas. I don't think anyone's going to be surprised by this because it actually tends to match pretty one-to-one on the 7 disparity reduction domains at the county, but there are a few others from the University of Minnesota. So these are just a collection of places where we see the most activity. And in what ways are people collaborating? I think when people think about collaborating with the University of Minnesota, it tends to be people say, oh, like it's about research, it's about evidence-based research. And while that is very true, and that is a big part of the collaborations that occur, there's a lot of ways in which the university can be a support and add capacity to your unit, your department, your leadership. This is just a list of a few ways in which collaborations have occurred. It's through community engaged research. It's through workshops facilitation. There's events that bring folks together that spark individual collaborations. And there's other things that fall outside of that. So, for example, the Urban Agriculture Initiative, which is University of Minnesota Extension working with the county to take 2 vacant lots and turn it into a community garden. So this is just a quick glance of the range of ways, and not listed here is, folks have been able to give talks at staff retreats. They provide consultation services and thought partnership. They even are able to administer small grants to community-based organizations to aid in capacity building, community engagement, outreach. So there's just a lot of really cool and exciting ways in which you can leverage the University of Minnesota, but it's also can be kind of overwhelming, right? Like there's a lot of options. So then it comes to the question, how do I connect with the U? Who do I connect with you? Which is why we, as the HUP office, are here to support you in your work and to serve as that liaison to help you figure out how and who to connect with. So dropping into what it is that we do here at the HUP office that supports this vibrant ecosystem, a little bit about us. So the HUP office is a jointly funded organization, and we've got 2 homes. So we're split. Our funding is split 50-50 between the University of Minnesota and Hennepin County. We're housed at the University of Minnesota Center for Regional and Urban Affairs. Both Margaret and I are actually University of Minnesota employees, but we do also have a home at the county under the Strategic Planning and Initiatives Department and the Operations line of business. We report directly to David Huff, and our work is guided by a leadership team and an advisory committee from both institutions that really help support and guide some of these mutually beneficial priority areas. Most of the collaborations between the county and the U are formalized through a master cooperative agreement. And I'll just spend a brief minute here because some people don't realize there's actually an established agreement between these 2 institutions. This kind of started, like I said, back 20 years ago when both leaders from these institutions realized that not only are relationships built at the speed of trust, but they're also built at the speed of contracting. So you may have a project that you wished, could have been completed and at least initiated within, your project ideation phase within a couple months, right? And so you started contracting and all of a sudden you're stuck in contract limbo land and time fades, relationships start to get frayed. And this was really an effort that these entities realized to facilitate work faster and more effectively. Like, let's have an agreement in place. So for those that didn't know it, that's in place. There's pre-negotiated terms like publishing, access to private county welfare data, records. There's lots of things. I won't bore people with the details of this, but what I want you to take away is that there's agreement in place so you don't have to go through legal contracting on either end, and it really can help speed up the work. So now I'm going to pass it over to Margaret.
Yeah. So thanks, Amy, for the background on why we do what we do and then getting us started moving into kind of how we do it. I'll add a little bit more detail on some of our specific programs and what our mission and vision look like. So our vision for the HUP partnership overall is that cutting edge collaborations help reduce disparities and enrich the lives of Hennepin County residents. So that's really what's driving the partnership as a broad collaborative. And then our mission as the HUP office, Amy and I, is to catalyze and support mutually beneficial partnerships between the county and the university, also to benefit Hennepin County residents. So we try to keep residents centered in our work as much as possible. So as we're driving to this question of how do we connect where it counts, these are a couple of the ways where we try to connect these 2 large institutions at mutual points of interest. So these core support areas bring together academic research and practitioner expertise for community impact. They build a network of individuals working towards shared goals. They encourage diverse entities to engage in collaborative projects, events, and dialogue. They support alignment of priorities while respecting the unique missions and approaches of each institution. And then overall, they promote a culture of cross-sector collaboration to address community challenges, which is really what HUP's ethos is baked in. You'll note at the end, we have this comment about not having discretionary funding or not being a grant-making entity. This question comes up a lot. I think there can be some confusion about where the dollars flow from. And so we just want to clarify that HUP is not a grant-making entity. We have two exceptions to that rule, which is our student programming, I'll talk about that next, and an annual HUP Mixer collaborative grant. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'll pivot into our student programming, which provides hands-on opportunities for students to apply their skills in a real-world setting, and is an example of one of the more direct programs that HUP offers. So we have two student programs. I'll talk first about our HUP Collaborative Research Assistantship. We're entering our 4th year of the HCRA program. This was our first student program. This is a free program to the county. It's supported by the Center for Urban and Regional Affairs, which is the unit that houses Amy and I over at UMN. We match 6 graduate students with county identified research questions that help advance policy on complex social challenges. One thing that we're really proud of is that this is a cohort style summer program where HUP wraps around programming, group and individualized support, and mentoring so that we can provide students with opportunities to share their knowledge and skills with the county, but also with each other. Throughout the summer, the county supervisors for each student are also actively involved in the mentoring process, and our students have had really positive experiences with their supervisors over at the county. And one of our kind of examples of how successful the program has been is that for the 2nd year in a row, multiple graduate assistants have been hired to continue working on their projects in the fall. So the projects are designed to go from late May until late August. And we've had a couple times where students have been making so much good progress that they were extended past that. For this research assistantship, the next opportunity to engage would be joining our webinar in August. So similar to this, it'll be around the lunch hour virtual option, and all 6 students will present their findings. So it's a great way to join and learn what the students have been working on. It's also a great way if you, as a department, are thinking, I might want to have a research student next summer. You can see some examples of what the work might look like. And then our RFP opens up again next December. Our other program is the HUP Evaluation Assistantship, or the HEA. This was started based on the success of the HCRA pilot. And the purpose of this program is to develop evaluation tools that help the county improve its ability to reduce disparities and create an environment where all residents can thrive. So this is a pretty fundamentally different program from HCRA in that it's only 1 or 2 students, so it doesn't have as much of a focus on the cohort kind of inter-student learning, although we highlight that as much as we can. But what it does offer is that it runs for a full year. So the graduate research assistants help plan and design evaluation frameworks, processes, and tools that build capacity for policymakers to make ongoing and long-term strategic decisions. Not only do the GRAs work with a county subject matter expert, but they also receive guidance from a University of Minnesota faculty member who we have a longstanding relationship with and who specializes in program evaluation. So this is a little bit more specialized of a program. If you're in the audience wondering which one is for me, we try to keep the HEA program really specific to program evaluation, whereas HCRA has a lot more flexibility in terms of you could be in a more exploratory research stage. The next opportunity to engage with HEA, we're at an interesting time in the cycle in that we just had a student start. So typically we solicit county project proposals around September, select in October, and then 1 or 2 projects are chosen. So the students begin in mid-January and it runs for a year. So our student is about 6 weeks in and already providing a lot of value to the county. For both our student programming offerings, it's important to us that we incorporate feedback from prior years and continuously improve. So that's part of our values as a HUP office as well. I'm going to hopefully pivot us over quickly to our guest speaker, your colleague Karen Gaius from Environment and Energy. We have admittedly had a number of technical challenges, so I apologize, mostly to Karen, but I believe that Karen has been able to join via phone, and I'm going to hopefully be able to allow her to speak and share her experience working with HUP. So it looks like, at least on my side, it now says guest talking permitted, and Karen, you should be able to unmute and then start talking.
Okay.
Awesome.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Well, no worries about the technical difficulties. I'm just sorry I can't see everyone else there today. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Karen Gallus, and I use she, her pronouns. And HUP invited me here to talk a little bit or tell a story about a university partnership that I have that has really grown and evolved over time and how that has happened for us. So I'm kind of glad I didn't prepare any slides because those would have been useless, I think. But I will tease that I think my kind of core university collaborator, Dr. Brian Runk, is coming to the webinar series in a couple months to present on some of the work we're doing together. So that'll be a little bit more technical and visual in nature, and I'll just talk at you a little bit. So I work in the Environment and Energy Department, and I manage the Land and Water Unit. And one part of that job for us is doing habitat and wildlife conservation work. And the kind of key way that we do that is through a tool called a conservation easement. And for people who aren't aware, a conservation easement is a way of essentially restricting future land use to preserve conservation value. So like our conservation value is something like wildlife habitat or stormwater storage or flood mitigation and all these other great things that we get from nature and from open spaces that benefit, our infrastructure and our people and our health and those sorts of things. So the county's been doing that kind of work for a very long time. I'm at a very low level. And in 2018, we received our first big grant from the Outdoor Heritage Fund, which is a part of the Clean Water, Land and Legacy Amendment in the state of Minnesota. And that was the purpose of that was to really increase the pace of doing that work, that land conservation and protection in Hennepin County. So part of that was putting together a technical advisory committee of partners that also do related work and protect and improve habitat. And it was going really, really great. And one of our key partners there was the Three Rivers Park District. And we had several other people in the room too. And we pretty quickly realized that we all kind of do similar things with different tools, with different priorities, and getting on the same page in terms of those priorities and goals and which tools were best suited to which opportunities was going to be a really important thing to do to work together really efficiently and collaboratively and use our resources in the best possible way. And so as natural resource professionals do and have been doing since the beginning of cartography, probably. We printed out a bunch of big maps and hung them on the walls and gave people Sharpies and Post-it notes. And we kind of just started circling things and putting Post-it notes on the walls. And that was really great and really helpful. But it was also 2019. So we were all quite accustomed to sitting at our desk and being able to kind of toggle off and on data sets that help us evaluate things and make decisions and inform future actions. And as much fun as it was to kind of be together in the same room and draw those circles and put those Post-it notes out there, we knew that the process of, we were missing a lot of information, and that the process of turning those circles and Post-it notes into a data set that we could actually use and refer to and keep updated was going to be pretty challenging. And also it just kind of looked janky, and so might not be viewed as super credible. So this is kind of where I actually get to the university part of the story. I don't think I was even aware of the Hennepin-University Partnership at that time. I was still pretty new to the county, but I did have a colleague at the university. So for me, the kind of like initiation of this collaboration was really just like reaching out to someone I knew who I had worked with on some collaborative mapping and design projects in a previous role. And I just called him up and like talked about the situation and asked him if he thought some of the tools and technologies that he had access to through U-Spatial primarily might be appropriate for kind of like helping solve this problem, to get partners on the same page and kind of aligned around goals and priorities. So we kind of started out with a $25,000 work order under the master HUP agreement. And the purpose of that first one was really just to develop a workable proof of concept on the idea of using like a real-time collaborative geodesign tool to do that instead of paper and pens and pencils. And I had a little bit of work to do to convince my partners that that was a good idea. It's certainly more complicated and challenging to set up, but I was really pretty convinced that on the back end, it was going to be a much more workable, sustainable, credible set of information for us to use long into the future. So the other kind of goal of that one was to test off-the-shelf Esri project or product called GeoPlanner and see if it would meet our needs. That was one of my favorite things about like the early stages of working with Brian. I was kind of imagining this very, very expensive custom designed app, which, spoiler alert, is kind of where we ended up. But he really kind of like took a step back and said like, hey, there are some lower investment, easier to set up options that we should look at before we like go down that path. And that was a really helpful addition to what I was thinking at that time. So that initial project concluded with a presentation to a pretty big room full of Hennepin County and Three Rivers Park District staff, and that was probably 2020 or 2021. And everyone left like pretty excited and committed to the pathway of getting doing this digitally and collaboratively, but also pretty convinced that we would need to develop a custom platform in order to meet our needs. So from there, the kind of partnership and collaboration really has just evolved organically and incrementally. And along with that, our shared goals and ambitions have too. And the university has been a really big part of helping us frame and think through that. The development of the custom application occurred kind of 2022, 2023. And this was really a time period when we started getting other partners involved too. We now have a cooperative agreement with Three Rivers Park District where they're actually, sending money to the county to help support this work through the Hennepin University Partnership because the master agreement allows us to work together, kind of do the contracting more efficiently. It just kind of makes sense to do that. And so by 2023, we had really expanded the ambitions of the partnership. So the goal had become, as we had started to realize the potential of collaborative mapping and collaborative design, we were no longer just trying to create and maintain a map of natural system priorities, but to tie that map to tools and technical assistance that could help translate those priorities into action and outcomes, particularly with what we often refer to as non-traditional natural resource partners. So I work in an area where people are very excited and very passionate about what we do, and we are often preaching to the choir. And we are rarely the people who actually get to make land use decisions, but we don't do a very good job of talking to and reaching the people who are making those land use decisions. So we became really focused on, okay, we want to protect and improve natural systems in our communities, for our residents, for our infrastructure, but we're not making those decisions. How can we build something that will really help us connect with and provide resources and information and support to people like planners or people like developers who are really kind of like scoping out projects and making decisions about land use changes that are happening on a day-to-day basis. So that idea has now kind of crystallized into something that we call the Natural Resources Partner Coalition. And in 2024, we worked with the University, the Park District, and a couple of other partners to submit a grant proposal to the LCCMR that was recommended for funding. And pending legislative approval later this year, that funding will come online to bring some additional resources to this kind of ever-growing collaboration. And as of today, Dr. Runk and his lab have developed a custom collaborative mapping platform that is capable of integrating geospatial data sets that we need to inform priorities. So the things that we kind of like look at in terms of pollution and habitat quality and like that science that we use, but it also is able to collect information from the general public about natural spaces that they value in their communities. And it serves as a real-time data gathering tool for collecting like information from planning and natural resources practitioners from like primarily from our local government partners. So we're able to kind of go and talk to city partners, have them input information into one system, and then have a full comprehensive look at that information joined with those other data sets to really inform priorities from a wide variety of perspectives. We tested the platform with partners in an in-person workshop in May of 2024. We did some really cool virtual workshops in January, just a month or two ago. And it's been working really, really well. And it's been really powerful to see such good, like so much information all in one place, and has allowed us to identify patterns and similarities and themes that we definitely wouldn't have been able to see or notice or act on in the past. And just a couple, as Brian also connected us to the Resilient Communities Project, which I believe was highlighted in last month's webinar. And later this year, we're going to start working with RCP on developing some of those kind of like technical assistance tools to help move our partners from, just setting goals to actually like acting and implementing. And then I think the last thing that I'll mention there is another part of my job has been working on figuring out how to incorporate or prioritize or the feasibility of nature-based climate solutions in the net zero goal as part of the climate action plan. And we have a newer project with Dr. Runk's lab going on now to start working on that in a way that builds upon the collaborative mapping platform that we've already used. And so that will be built in a way that allows us to kind of turn that into a decision support tool that helps us evaluate, one nature-based climate solution versus another and their relative costs and contribution towards climate and natural system and eventually human-centric outcomes. So it's kind of over the course of, 5-6 years now here, we've really moved from really just a pretty small proof of concept, like could this ever work, to something that has become really big and expansive and integrated in a particularly important way for the type of work that we're doing that I don't think we certainly wouldn't have ever been able to do it on our own. And it definitely would not have been possible kind of just like working with a private sector consultant either, because there was just so much iterative work to this, and like figuring, not exactly knowing where we're going next, but knowing that we're on the right path for kind of like those broad and really diverse public interest goals that we're trying to accomplish. So.
Erin, thank you so much. That was a perfect example of, kind of one of our most successful partnerships and a deep one as well. I think Amy and I, or the HUP office generally, is on board to support partnership at a variety of levels based on what works for our county partners. And we get really excited about something like this where you aren't just working, it's not just the county working with the U in a transactional way or vice versa, but rather kind of co-creating and coming up with shared goals. So there was a lot in that story that I was excited to hear about. And on like a logistical note, I heard you say at the beginning, I had an idea and I reached out to someone, and I was thinking of Amy's point of the master agreement, really helping our contacts on both the U and the county side get to work quickly. So instead of it being you, Karen, reaching out to someone at the U and then 2 years later getting a contract set up, you were able to get working faster. So thank you so much for sharing that story. All right. So we'll be wrapping up here in just a couple minutes and moving to our Q&A. But if you're on the call and you're wondering or you want to learn more about HUP or talk through a potential collaboration, we do have some resources and some ways to engage. We encourage people to look at our county SharePoint site. That should be easy. It's baked right into the county SharePoint. And then we do also have our HUP website. All of these links will come out in a follow-up to the webinar. And on our, I believe on our SharePoint site, we also have a review of our past events and webinars. So in the case of the webinars, you can see all of the university expertise that we've had present in the past couple of years. There's also extensive information about the work order process and more information about this master agreement. And we have videos that county contracting has made to walk people through the process. We will also have a one-pager coming out soon that has tips around what makes for a good collaboration. We'll share that when it's available, but just know that Amy and I are always here to support fledgling ideas. So whether they're completely fully baked or if you need support to get there, we're happy to help. So I'll move into our question and answer section. Some prompting questions, as you're either thinking right now about questions you might want to ask, or if you're just leaving and these questions can kind of carry with you. I'm curious for folks on the call, if you've worked with UMN before, what prompted you to collaborate? And if you haven't worked with UMN before, is there a space where, as you heard Karen tell her story, perhaps you thought, oh, it would have been really useful if we had a university contact, or maybe you have an upcoming project. So those are just some questions to take away from today's webinar. But in the meantime, Amy and I are here. I think Karen's still on the line as well. So I'm curious if anyone in the audience has questions for us. We have our Q&A function available. And I see we have a hand raised. I know that usually we use the Q&A function, but I think I can just allow this person to speak if that's okay. Since I just learned that feature worked thanks to our tech pivot with Amy. Okay, looks like.
Oh, yes, hi. Oh, sorry, I didn't find there is Q&A session. Yes, maybe I can briefly introduce myself. I am a first-year PhD student from UMN, and recently our lab is actively working on the overdose harm reduction and also the recovery. So, we would like to initiate a communication with the county, but I do not find there is any related topic. So I'm very interested in if there is any opportunity to collaborate with county and how we can initiate this communication. Yeah, thank you so much.
It's a great question. Thank you so much for joining. So just reach out to us. In our follow-up email, we'll give you some contact information. And even though we talked a lot about how the county can connect with the U, it also goes both ways. So this is a perfect example of that. So we will, once you send us an email, we'll kind of get in contact. We go through an intake process, but we'll hear about your idea. We'll be able to see who from the other side of the county might be interested in collaborating, and we can see what happens. Great question.
All right. So I don't see any other attendees' hands raised, nor do I see any other questions in the Q&A. Let me make sure that's true. Yep. I don't see any other questions in the Q&A. So I think we can end a little bit early, but like Amy mentioned, there will be a follow-up that has a lot more information in it, and you're also welcome to reach out to hup@umn.edu. When you get the email, that contact information will be clear. So we can answer any additional questions that come up after this as well.
Thanks so much, everybody. We appreciate you carving out the time. And thank you, Karen.
Mhm.